They said you wouldn't make it. They didn't say it out loud. They didn't need to. The silence said enough. The way they looked at you, like you were already gone. Like your story was over before it could even begin. They didn't expect to see you rise. They didn't expect to see you smile again. They didn't expect you to survive. But here you are. Not because it was easy. Not because you had everything figured out. Not because you always believed. But because God wasn't finished with you. And whether they saw it or not, heaven did. Heaven saw the silent nights when your soul was breaking. Heaven saw the moments you held your breath just to keep from crying. Heaven saw the battles you didn't post about. The ones you didn't even talk about. Because the weight was too heavy. Because you didn't want anyone to see how close you were to giving up. And yet, somehow, you didn't. Somehow, through the chaos, through the loneliness, through the pain that wrapped around your chest like chains, you kept going. Even when your own strength failed, something deeper carried you forward. That was God. That was grace. That was the unseen hand of mercy pulling you through a storm you weren't even supposed to survive. There are things you've walked through that others would have drowned in. There are moments you've stood in that would have made others crumble. But you didn't fall apart, not completely. You cracked, yes. You bled, yes. You screamed in silence, yes. But you're still here. Still breathing. Still standing. Still becoming. And that alone is a victory the world will never understand. They thought it was over for you. But God said, not yet. The enemy whispered, this is the end. But heaven thundered, this is just the beginning. You see, survival wasn't an accident. It wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was war, and you didn't fight it alone. There were angels surrounding you in the places no one else could reach. Archangel Michael stood between you and what tried to consume you. There were spiritual attacks you never felt, because they were deflected before they even touched your skin. There were nights the darkness tried to convince you to give up, but you were being held by something stronger than despair. You were supposed to break. But you bent and you bent and you bent, and somehow, you rose again. You've outlived betrayal. You've walked through abandonment. You've sat with heartbreak. You've eaten with grief. You've learned the language of loneliness. You've stared into emptiness and said, still, I will rise. So now, when people wonder how you made it, when they question how you didn't lose your mind, how you didn't lose your soul, how you didn't disappear into the pain, you don't need to explain. Just say, look at me now. This is what survival looks like. Not loud. Not proud. Not perfect. But sacred. Quietly divine. An unfolding miracle. If you feel this truth in your soul, that you're still here for a reason, like this video, share it with someone who's still fighting, and comment, I survived because of God. Don't forget to subscribe for more messages like this one. You don't have to apologize for surviving. You don't have to explain the path you took. Not everyone will understand. Not everyone needs to. Because survival isn't always beautiful. Sometimes it looks like hiding. Sometimes it looks like screaming into pillows. Sometimes it looks like silent dinners and tear-soaked nights. But even then, it's sacred. Because the breath in your lungs is proof, God isn't done. You're not who you used to be, and that's okay. You're softer in some places. Harder in others. More guarded. More aware. But still open to the possibility that life has something beautiful ahead. And it does. You weren't supposed to survive this. But look at you now. Not just surviving, but starting to believe in joy again. In healing. In peace. In God's plan for your life. You're not just a survivor. You're a sign that what was meant to destroy you became the very thing that made you unshakable. There's something haunting about silence, isn't there? Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that settles in your chest when no one checks on you. When you sit in a room full of people and still feel unseen. When your phone doesn't ring, and your heart starts to believe, maybe you don't matter anymore. You know that silence. You felt it like a weight pressing down on your spirit. And in those moments, the quiet ones, you start to hear things you didn't ask to hear. The echo of old wounds. The voice of fear. The lies the enemy whispers when you're tired. You're alone. You're not worth fighting for. You won't make it through this time. And if you're not careful, you start believing it. You start wearing it like a second skin. You start living like survival was just a coincidence, like you slipped through the cracks of grace. But let me remind you of something heaven already knows: you were never forgotten. You were never alone. Even when you felt like the world abandoned you, God never did. Even when your tears dried on your pillow, and your prayers felt like they bounced off the ceiling, He was there. Watching. Waiting. Weeping with you. He was in the silence. He was in the in-between. He was in the midnight hour when your chest felt too tight to breathe, and you couldn't even form the words to pray. Archangel Michael didn't leave your side when everyone else did. He stood guard over your soul. He fought off spirits that tried to suffocate your purpose. He shielded your heart when it began to crack. Because there's something in you that darkness couldn't take. Your survival wasn't an accident. It was a war, and heaven made sure you won. They think because you don't speak about it, you weren't scarred. They think because you're smiling now, you never bled. But God knows the truth. He knows the nights you broke down in the shower, the days you wore a mask to make it through, the moments you whispered, "God, please, just help me make it to tomorrow." And you did. You made it to tomorrow. Over and over again. Some days you didn't rise strong. Some days you rose shaky. Some days you didn't rise until noon. But you rose, and that's what matters. Because your story isn't about being untouched. It's about being chosen. You were chosen to live through what others didn't. You were chosen to carry a light through the darkest places. And even though you didn't ask for it, even though you didn't feel ready, God trusted you with it. That's why the enemy came so hard. That's why the fire felt relentless. Because there's something inside you that threatens hell. Something eternal. Something anointed. Something that refuses to die. And it's not just your heart. It's not just your will. It's not even your strength. It's your calling. The reason you're still breathing is because your story is still unfolding. There are lives waiting to hear your voice. There are broken people waiting to see your healing. There are silent hearts watching your strength in secret, hoping they can be as brave as you. So don't ever think you're invisible. Heaven sees you. And the darkness fears you. Because no matter what came against you, you didn't break. Yes, you cried. Yes, you collapsed. Yes, you questioned. But your soul remained intact. And that's why your comeback is going to terrify everything that tried to take you out. If you've made it this far, if you've ever felt like giving up but didn't, take a second to like this video, comment, "I'm not done yet," share this message with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more words that speak to your spirit. Now listen. This next season of your life isn't just about survival. It's about revelation. God is about to show you why the battle was so intense. Why the delay felt so long. Why the pain cut so deep. Because what He's preparing for you is bigger than anything you prayed for in your weakest moment. It's not going to look like what you expected. It's going to look like what you need. He didn't save you just to return you to normal. He saved you to elevate you. You've graduated from the level where you needed approval to feel worthy. From the place where you needed people to believe in you just to move. From the mindset that said you weren't enough. You've outgrown it. You've outlasted it. And now, you're becoming who you were always meant to be. Not the version that pleased everyone. Not the version that played small. But the version that knows survival is just the beginning. That purpose is waiting on the other side of pain. That heaven didn't keep you alive to stay quiet. He kept you to testify. To walk in authority. To shake things up. Because when God brings you out of the fire, you don't walk back in like everyone else. You walk back in carrying flames of glory. You become the proof that even in the worst seasons, God never loses. And neither did you. There's something different about a person who survived what should have destroyed them. They walk slower, not because they're weak, but because they've learned to measure every step. They speak softer, not because they lack voice, but because they understand the weight words carry. And when they smile, it's not shallow. It's the kind of smile that says, "I've been through hell, but I didn't stay there." That's who you are now. Not who you were before the storm. Not the version of you that broke. But the one who rose from the wreckage. The one who didn't lose their soul in the struggle. You didn't just survive. You transformed. You were reborn in the ruins. You were reshaped in the darkness. And every scar now tells a story, not of defeat, but of resurrection. People look at you and see strength. But they don't see the price you paid to carry that strength. They don't know the nights you cried so hard your pillow stayed wet until morning. They don't know how many times you had to encourage yourself just to get out of bed. They don't know how often you had to pretend to be okay just to keep others from worrying. But God knows. And that's why He's about to reward you in public for what you survived in private. See, the pain you endured wasn't random. It wasn't meaningless. It wasn't punishment. It was preparation. God had to let some things fall apart so He could build something that can't be shaken. He had to let some people leave so your circle could be cleared for those who carry light. He had to let you feel what it's like to be alone so you'd recognize what real presence feels like, His presence. Heaven has always been near. Even when you couldn't feel it. Even when you doubted it. Even when you were convinced that your cries went unheard. Let me tell you the truth, there were things targeting you that never made it through. There were traps set for you that your feet never found. Because Archangel Michael was fighting wars in the unseen. You don't even know what you've been saved from. Sometimes survival looks ordinary on the outside, but in the spirit realm, your life was a battlefield of light and shadow. And light won. You're not just breathing. You're breathing because heaven stepped in. There's a reason your plans fell through. A reason the door slammed shut. A reason they walked away. And it's not because you weren't worthy. It's because you were too valuable to be wasted in places that didn't honor the fire inside you. Sometimes God has to let your heart break so you never go back to what was breaking you slowly. Sometimes He has to allow the silence so His voice becomes the only one you truly trust. And in that silence, something sacred happened, you found yourself. Not the version molded by expectations. Not the watered-down version you became to be accepted. But the version that looks like heaven. The version God had in mind all along. Now the enemy is terrified. Because he couldn't destroy you. And he knows, if you ever realize who you really are, the impact will be unstoppable. You've tasted pain. You've walked through loss. You've carried burdens too heavy for one soul. And still, you chose light. That is divine strength. You're not defined by the things that happened to you. You're defined by what you chose to do after. And you chose to keep going. Even when the odds were against you. Even when nothing made sense. Even when giving up would have been easier. You kept breathing. You kept hoping. You kept whispering, God, just one more day. And He heard you. Every time. He didn't forget. He didn't ignore. He was waiting, for the right time. The appointed time. And it's near. If this part of the journey speaks to your spirit, like this video, share it with someone who's still healing, comment, I've been through the fire, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next parts of this message. You see, your story is going to make others believe again. Your breakthrough will be the blueprint for someone else's survival. Your restoration will be the sign that God still shows up even after the dust settles. Don't hide your scars. They're sacred. Don't silence your story. It's needed. Don't underestimate your presence. You carry something holy now. Something that cost you more than anyone will ever know. This is why it couldn't be easy. Why the road had to be this hard. Because what's being birthed through you isn't common. It's not ordinary. God is forming a testimony through you that generations will speak about. So let them wonder. Let them ask how. Let them question. Because soon, they'll see. They'll see the glow that comes after grief. They'll see the strength that follows surrender. They'll see the power of someone who walked through the fire and came out carrying God's glory. You weren't supposed to survive this. But look at you now. You may not realize this, but you've been walking through sacred ground. Not the kind made of polished stone or holy buildings. But the kind made of pain, of pressure, of private battles no one applauded you for winning. You've been surviving in a wilderness others couldn't even see. Smiling in the daylight, bleeding in the shadows. And through it all, you've become something unshakable. You didn't just endure hardship, you've been refined by it. There's a difference between those who go through pain and those who are transformed by it. You didn't just wear the weight, you learned how to carry it with grace. You didn't let the sorrow define you. You let it deepen your capacity for love, for empathy, for strength. And that is rare. It's why you've felt like you don't fit anywhere. Why rooms feel smaller now. Why some people can't reach you anymore. Because you've changed. What you've been through broke the surface version of you, the people-pleasing you, the always smiling, always agreeing you, so the real you could rise. The version of you that understands silence. That carries fire. That doesn't need approval to feel chosen. You had to go through that pain so that the shallow things would no longer satisfy you. So you'd stop settling for people who only loved the parts of you that were convenient. So you'd finally see what heaven already knew, you were meant for more. That's why it hurt so deep. That's why it stripped so much away. Because God wasn't just healing your wounds, He was awakening your identity. You weren't born to stay hidden. You weren't created to live small. You weren't designed to merely survive. But to rise. To shine. To speak. To carry glory in your walk and fire in your voice. And yes, that's exactly why the enemy tried to silence you early. That's why the warfare wasn't random. It was strategic. The enemy saw glimpses of your future. He saw what would happen if you healed. He saw what would happen if you stopped apologizing for your light. He saw the weight you carried in your spirit, and it terrified him. That's why he came for your mind. That's why he tried to break your heart. That's why he sent betrayal dressed in friendship. That's why he whispered that your story was over. But here's the secret, he was wrong. God had already written a different ending. He already planted resurrection power in your bones. He already assigned angels to your name. And they didn't take their eyes off you, even when you did. When you collapsed in your room and said, "God, I can't do this anymore," He didn't judge you. He wept with you. He wrapped invisible arms around your pain and whispered, "But I'm not done with you yet." And He wasn't. And He still isn't. There's a whole future waiting on the other side of this moment. And it won't look like the past. Because you're not returning to the old version of your life. You're stepping into something new, something higher, something holy. So if you're still in a valley right now, if you're still feeling the sting of loss or the heaviness of transition, take heart. You're not being buried. You're being planted. And planted things rise again. If this truth is growing inside your spirit, like this video, comment, "I'm being planted, not buried," share this with someone who feels lost, and don't forget to subscribe for the rest of this life-changing message. Listen closely now, you are not behind. You are not late. You are not forgotten. You are right on schedule, divine schedule. God didn't save you just to let you wander. He's not going to let your purpose evaporate just because you had a few breakdowns. He's not rewriting your story because of what you lost. He's restoring it, piece by piece, in ways more beautiful than you imagined. It won't look like the plan you had. And that's a blessing. Because if you had what you thought you wanted, you would have missed the miracle of what's ahead. Sometimes heaven has to break your plans so it can rebuild your life with eternity in mind. What's coming will make sense of what broke you. What's next will justify every tear. What's ahead will redeem every scar. You didn't survive just to breathe. You survived because something eternal is now marked on your life. And no one can take that away from you. Not the people who left. Not the ones who doubted. Not even the parts of you that still feel afraid. Because survival has turned into purpose. And purpose will now turn into power. There's a strange quiet that comes after survival. Not peace, not at first. But a silence that feels unfamiliar. Because you've been fighting for so long, you don't remember what it's like to breathe without panic. To rest without guilt. To wake up without bracing for something to go wrong. This is the space you're in now, the space after the storm, but before the breakthrough. And it's confusing. You're grateful to still be standing. But you're also tired. Not just physically. Soul tired. Like every part of you is still carrying memories of the battle even though the war is over. This is where many people give up, because survival taught them how to fight. But not how to live again. But not you. Because deep inside, you know there's more than just making it through. There's meaning. There's momentum. There's a destiny that didn't die when everything else did. You're learning to feel again. To open your heart slowly. To dream without flinching. And it feels strange, but it's also beautiful. Because broken things don't heal all at once. They heal in layers. In quiet mornings where you don't hate yourself. In soft nights where your chest finally stops hurting. In unexpected laughter that surprises even you. That's where you are now, somewhere between restoration and revelation. And even if it feels small, it's sacred. God is doing something in this stillness. He's rearranging your soul. He's rewiring your identity. Not based on what you've lost, but on who you really are, loved. Chosen. Called. Protected. And rising. Let the world think you're taking too long. Let them wonder why you haven't bounced back yet. Let them call you distant, too quiet, too guarded. Because what they don't understand is that you're not rebuilding from a bad season. You're rebuilding from complete devastation. And that takes time. That takes God. Archangel Michael didn't carry you through the fire just so you could settle in the ashes. He carried you so you could stand again with fire in your eyes, and purpose in your hands. And that's what's happening now. You're remembering who you were before the pain, and discovering who you are because of it. You used to live for survival. Now, you're stepping into significance. You're starting to realize that relationship wasn't your home. That failure wasn't your finish line. That loss wasn't the end of your joy. They were all transitions. Painful ones, yes. But necessary. Because your identity was never supposed to be built on people who left, or places you outgrew, or moments that wounded you. Your identity was always meant to be anchored in God. And when everything else shattered, He remained. That's why you're still here. Not because you had the answers, but because you had an anchor. One you couldn't always see, but one who never let go of you. Now your feet are standing on sacred ground. Not perfect ground. Not finished ground. But real ground, solid, steady, unshaken by storms. You're standing because of grace. You're rising because of destiny. You're healing because of truth. And you're glowing because of what you've walked through. This isn't just recovery. It's resurrection. You don't look like what you've been through, because God has a way of restoring in a way that confuses everyone who watched you fall. He's about to do it again. If this part of the message resonates with your journey, like this video, share it with someone still learning how to breathe after survival, comment, "I'm learning to live again," and subscribe to continue walking this journey of healing and purpose. Now hear this. Your silence is not weakness. Your slowness is not failure. Your stillness is not laziness. It's healing. You've been at war with life for so long, you forgot what it meant to trust the process. But now, you're being reintroduced to peace. Not the shallow kind the world offers, but the kind that comes when God whispers, "You made it through the worst. Now let me show you the best." You're not just being restored to what you lost. You're being rebuilt for what you never even imagined. This is not the end of your story. This is the beginning of your becoming. And what's coming will require all the lessons the fire taught you. You're not fragile anymore. You're not who you used to be. And that's a gift. Because now you don't need approval to walk in purpose. Now you don't shrink when you feel misunderstood. Now you don't question your worth based on someone else's absence. You know who kept you. You know who loved you through the madness. You know who breathed life into your lungs when you had nothing left to give. And it wasn't them. It was God. You've reached the part of your life where the past no longer has the power to define you. Not because the pain disappeared. Not because the memories stopped coming. But because something inside you decided, "This will not be the end of me." And that quiet decision, that sacred vow between your soul and your spirit, it shifted everything. You stopped waiting for people to come back and make things right. You stopped wishing for closure that would never arrive. You stopped needing permission to heal. And you began to rise. Not loud. Not all at once, but deeply. And that's what makes this part so powerful. Because what you're carrying now isn't just survival, it's wisdom. You've been through storms, but now you understand the skies. You've been broken, but now you understand what's worth holding on to. You've been disappointed, but now you know not to place your hope in fragile hands. God has become more than just a word to you. He's become your anchor, your breath, your restoration, your Father. That's why the enemy tried to kill your voice early. Because when someone walks with that kind of truth, they become a threat. Not because they're dangerous, but because they carry light. You don't need a platform to shine. You don't need a title to be impactful. You've already been anointed by pain and appointed by purpose. And even if the world doesn't see it yet, heaven does. Archangel Michael didn't stand over your life to preserve a story that ends in quiet defeat. He guarded you because your story has ripple effects you can't even comprehend. There's someone right now, breathing because of you. Holding on because they saw you didn't let go. Healing quietly because your survival gave them permission to hope again. This is what the enemy tried to silence. He thought if he could break your heart, you'd break your purpose. If he could delay your dreams, you'd stop dreaming. If he could isolate you, you'd forget who you are. But he underestimated the fire inside you. He underestimated your prayers, even the ones whispered through tears. He underestimated the army that stood behind you. Because you didn't fight alone. You never have. Some days you thought it was your strength. But now you realize, it was grace. Pure, unfiltered grace. God didn't save you to return you to normal. He saved you to elevate you. You are becoming someone who doesn't flinch when people walk away, someone who doesn't break when things don't go as planned, someone who trusts God more than timelines, more than comfort, more than approval. You've crossed over. And even if you don't fully feel it yet, your spirit knows, you're not the same. You've come too far to return to the version of yourself that thought survival was enough. Now you're walking into destiny. It's unfamiliar. It's raw. It's risky. But it's real. And after all the illusions you've walked through, real is exactly what you need. This time you're not building for others. This time, you're not proving anything. This time, you're walking fully into what God has prepared for you. And it won't require you to lose yourself. It will require you to embrace yourself. Fully. Completely. As the one who made it. The one who overcame. The one who carries heaven's fingerprints. If this part of your journey speaks to your soul, like this video, comment, "I'm walking in destiny," share this with someone coming out of survival mode, and subscribe for more divine words like this one. Look at your life. Look at how far you've come. Not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, silently. You've been healing without applause, growing without validation, becoming without a map. And still, you're here. You weren't supposed to survive this. But you did. And now, you're not just surviving. You're creating something beautiful from the ashes. You don't owe anyone explanations. You don't owe your past an apology. You don't owe broken people your healing. What you owe is obedience. To God. To your future. To the version of you that's waiting on the other side of courage. That's what this next season is about. Not revenge. Not recognition. But resurrection. Let them wonder. Let them whisper. Let them watch. Because what God is building in you will speak louder than any rumor, any loss, any betrayal. And one day, you'll look back and say, every scar had a reason. Every delay had a purpose. Every tear led me here. You've come too far to shrink back now. Too far to question whether you're worthy of what's next. Too far to entertain voices that echo old pain. Too far to sit in rooms that remind you of who you used to be. You've outgrown every version of yourself that thought survival was your final destination. Because deep down, you know this, you didn't survive just to remain quiet. You didn't walk through fire just to hide the light that came from it. There's a fire in you now, not the wild kind that destroys, but the divine kind that illuminates. A fire born from ashes. Refined in sorrow. Rooted in truth. That's why your presence feels different now. You're no longer the person who needs to explain yourself. You're no longer chasing people to see your worth. You've become someone who understands the weight of their story, and honors it. The things that used to break you, now they remind you of your strength. The people who used to define you, now they no longer have access. And the places that used to contain you, now they feel too small. Because you were never meant to stay confined to the pain that tried to limit your growth. This is your release season. The doors that locked behind you were not punishments. They were redirections. Because God didn't just save you from destruction, He saved you from distraction. There's a future He's preparing that your past cannot come with you into. Not because you're ashamed of it, but because it no longer serves the you that's rising. You've tasted loss. But now, you're being positioned for gain. Not just material, but internal. Peace. Clarity. Joy without fear. Purpose without pressure. And the beauty is, you're not even chasing it. You're simply walking toward what's already yours. The pain stripped away everything that wasn't real. It burned away the false. The masks. The illusions. Now, what's left is gold. The version of you that's been tested in fire but never consumed by it. That's why Archangel Michael didn't just protect you, he preserved your purpose. He stood watch over your name, your mind, your calling. There were attacks you never saw because they never touched you. There were spiritual battles fought in silence while you slept, while you wept, while you wondered if you were even worth saving. And heaven answered that question, you were. You are. You always will be. So when you walk into rooms now, you walk differently. Not because you're arrogant, but because you're aware. Aware of what it cost you to still be standing. Aware of how many times you almost gave up. Aware of how sacred your existence really is. You don't take life lightly anymore. You don't waste time on people who don't value presence. You don't apologize for protecting your peace. Because you've learned, peace is a weapon. And yours was earned in the trenches. If this message is waking something in your spirit, like this video, comment, "I'm walking in the fireproof version of me," share it with someone who needs this reminder, and subscribe for the final part of this journey. Listen. This next season of your life won't look like restoration, it will look like revelation. God isn't just returning what was lost. He's revealing who you've become in the process. And it's going to shock you. Because when the weight finally lifts, you'll realize how heavy you were carrying it. And how gracefully you did so. You'll start to remember the beauty in the mundane. The joy in simple things. The music in your own laughter. And when that happens, you'll know, you didn't just survive the pain. You overcame it. And now, you're living proof that what the enemy meant for evil, God has turned into glory. No, you weren't supposed to survive this. But God had other plans. Plans not just to keep you breathing, but to show the world what happens when someone refuses to quit and chooses to believe, even with trembling hands. Now, you walk with angels. You carry the presence of someone who's been to the edge, and returned with light in their eyes. You are the story. You are the sign. You are the miracle in motion. The truth is, you shouldn't be here. Not according to the battles you fought. Not according to the nights you almost didn't make it. Not according to the weight you were never trained to carry. But you are. You're here. Still breathing. Still standing. Still believing, even if just barely. And that is not weakness. That is warrior strength disguised as quiet endurance. Because no one saw the full depth of what you were up against. Not really. They didn't see the silent tears. The ache that clung to your soul long after the world had moved on. The confusion of being chosen and crushed at the same time. They didn't hear the conversations you had with God at 3 a.m., when you whispered, "Lord, if you're still with me, show me." And He did. Not with fireworks. Not with a grand rescue. But with presence. A stillness. A whisper in the chaos. An undeniable peace that made no sense, but held you anyway. That's how you survived. And that's how you're going to thrive. You see, survival was never the end goal. It was just the doorway. A painful, stretching, disorienting doorway into a life that's not built on who abandoned you, what broke you, or what you lost, but on who God is, and who He says you are. He didn't keep you alive just to see you exist. He kept you alive because you carry something eternal. Something sacred. Something this generation needs. And now, it's awakening. The version of you that never settled. The version of you that heard the lies but still believed the promise. The version of you that said, "If all I have left is God, I still have more than enough." You were tested in ways others may never understand. But you're not waiting for them to understand anymore. You're not trying to explain your value. You're not trying to prove you deserve to be here. You know. You know it was grace. You know it was God's hand. You know the things that were meant to destroy you actually developed you. That's why when you smile now, it's not shallow, it's sacred. It's not because life got easier, it's because you got deeper. And the deeper you go with God, the less you need from the world. That's the secret. That's why people feel peace around you now, because you carry what you had to bleed to learn. Because you no longer speak from theory, you speak from resurrection. They thought it was over. Even you did. But God saw the end from the beginning. He saw the pain, and He permitted it. He saw the breaking, and He used it. He saw the silence, and He spoke through it. So that when you came through, you wouldn't just be alive. You'd be anointed. Not the kind that needs recognition. Not the kind that chases applause. But the kind that moves in silence and still shakes the atmosphere. The kind that walks in rooms and shifts the energy without saying a word. The kind that prays for people who once betrayed you, and actually means it. You are that person now. And you got here not by skipping the pain, but by walking through it with your eyes on God. The world will try to rename you based on your wounds. But heaven has already called you by your purpose. You are not broken. You are branded. Marked by mercy. Covered by glory. And protected by angels. Do not return to the places that caused your survival mode. Don't shrink to fit old expectations. Don't apologize for your healing. Don't explain your glow. You were not just rescued. You were reborn. And from here on, everything changes. Because now you know, you were never alone. You were never forsaken. You were never forgotten. Archangel Michael stood where you couldn't. He fought when you were too tired. He guarded what the enemy tried to bury. And now, the world is about to witness the unveiling of what God was building all along. So walk. Not just as a survivor, but as a living testimony. Let your scars speak. Let your voice rise. Let your life glorify the one who never left you. Because you weren't supposed to survive this. But look at you now. You're not just surviving. You're soaring. You're shining. You're finally becoming everything heaven saw when it looked at you and said, "This one is mine." If these words stirred something deep in you, like this video, comment, "I am God's miracle," share it with someone who needs to know their survival has meaning, and subscribe for more messages straight from heaven's heart.